What exactly does the word Souls-like mean? Is it simply just a game that's mimicking Dark Souls better than other action RPGs? Or is it really a particular formula? I'm genuinely curious of where the community draws the line for this nickname. I want you to drop your definition in the comments below. Today I'm going to be breaking down which games I believe, while inspired by Dark Souls, have actually made quite an impact on their own. The games in this list are ranked from least to greatest in terms of my personal enjoyment. The first title to cover is the infamous Nioh. This game does a great job of using storyline very different from the types of fantasy that you would typically see in FromSoft titles, and even its counterparts, focusing more so on the story of William Adams, an Irish pirate turned samurai who appears as the main protagonist of Nioh, and is named after and inspired by the historic William Adams, an English navigator who helped propagate trading throughout the country and became one of the few known foreign samurai. Much of Nioh's fantasy takes inspiration from Japanese demon lore, while incorporating familiar systems of the Souls formula, but also has a completely different feel to the gameplay. I would argue that Nioh is most certainly challenging and rarely relies on cheesy sucker punches to deliver punishment to us players. Its color-coded loot system is a good addition, and something we've seen in games of all sorts. One thing that Nioh did in particular that I haven't seen since is the inclusion of allowing the player to use a variety of weapons at base level without meeting requirements, but with a lot less reduction in damage. For example, in Dark Souls, any of them for that matter, if you don't meet requirements for a weapon and you're level 1, you're just simply not using it. Hell, if you're even leveled, you can't use the weapon if it doesn't meet requirements, it just bonks off of stuff. But in Nioh, specifically as a level 1 character not meeting the stats, the weapons still are pretty viable and you can play the game with them. This makes it much nicer because you don't have to acquire items like rings or equipment to boost stats or anything like that. You have a wide variety of different builds and buffs to use that in combination can be devastating, giving a decent amount of accessibility to the game in terms of playstyle and difficulty scaling as you progress. The team that designed Nioh in particular were the same team that also made Ninja Gaiden. If you aren't familiar with it, it's worth a look, but you'll immediately notice some similarities when you compare the two. The subgenres are still different enough, but I really do hope they can reinvent Ninja Gaiden in the future. I played the original Nioh, and after 20 plus hours of gameplay, sadly it just didn't do enough for me. After seeing how improved the second Nioh looked, I have a lot of faith that the studio can launch new IPs in the future that will be much more solid. One thing I always sense with Nioh is that it felt like a game that could have came out a long time ago. The best word I can explain this with would be prototypey. Just not quite dialed in or polished as much as you would expect for a game released at that time. Now, you can disagree with me if you want. I would love to hear some cases over why that might not be true, but that's what I see. I happened to read a while back that it actually was in development for a while, and that it was planned to be released much earlier, but they didn't do it. By the time the sequel came out, it looked to me like what the original Nioh could have been on release. Since I'm not an expert on the Nioh games, someone drop a comment of your favorite feature that I didn't mention if you're a fan. Mortal Shell is the next game that I think is essential in this tier list. Mortal Shell embodies the essence of Souls titles in a package that kind of felt necessary for so long. From what I understand, I believe the team was something like 15 people, which would be considered an indie development. And to be fair, the game's pretty impressive considering it's not a AAA title, and also kind of a test run for their very first game they've made. Despite it not being anywhere near perfect, it was one of the only Souls-like games I actually replayed multiple times. I believe I replayed it at least 10 times or more, and did a couple rounds in a tournament that was super fun. The fluidity and pace to the game was good. The visuals looked very unique in its own world and atmosphere. Alternate combo strings combining heavy and light attacks, being able to cancel mid-combo into a jump attack, and dodge canceling is a great series of combat options that Mortal Shell offers. The hardened mechanic is one of the best action RPG mechanics ever implemented into any game in my opinion, and adds a lot of depth on the fly. Weapon-specific abilities and the parry system is extremely satisfying and seemed a lot more useful in tons of combat scenarios, rather than just being a feature that's there but unimportant. With the slick combat and well-crafted environments that go from nature all the way to otherworldly places that kind of make the game seem sci-fi, I was really disappointed the game was kind of shorter, but understandably because it was the studio's first test run of the formula they made, and I really hope their next title is similar or an extension of what they've already done. Code Vein is up next. The anime appearance of this game could be the selling point alone for some individuals that enjoy that kind of visual style, but I want to go on the record saying that I don't actually care for the anime aspects of Code Vein. There's most certainly a ton of story moments that's also affected by the anime style, and they come across super cheesy. What the game has to offer overall makes this situation non-important for me. Oftentimes, I found myself not even paying attention to the story. I think the base conflict is all that really matters for you to understand your purpose as you progress, but the combat and the challenge of the game itself was a high point. For those who love anime-style visuals and character interactions, along with enjoying Dark Souls, you should have no problem enjoying Code Vein. The fact that you have so much more freedom over changing up your build on the fly is a handy tool compared to the games that had been available beforehand. Usually a respec system located at a particular area of the map is commonplace as of the release of Dark Souls 3, but this more on-the-fly customization level is one of my favorite features. The amount of content in Code Vein was more than enough to have a playthrough that is similar runtime to Dark Souls games and boss fights that leave an impression. One fight from Code Vein that I still think about is Blade Bearer and Cannoneer. It was the first time I had seen an interpretation of Ornstein and Smough from Dark Souls done well. The complementary duo enemy fight isn't easy to pull off as an archetype. It's much easier just to double a single enemy type and have the chaos of attacks being spammed on the double be the difficulty factor. Blade Bearer and Cannoneer certainly passed my personal test of flowing together and creating traps that are organic for the player to get caught up in, rather than pure nonsense. The customization aspect of the game is great, the gameplay is fluid and challenging, and the story, while not amazing to me, like I mentioned before, does have some charm at times, and there was some moments I actually really did enjoy. The game was at the time the clear best choice for a Souls-like title that I could ever pick, and some of the best memories I have playing games in general reside in Code Vein. As a very quick break from the tier list, I just want to talk about a side note that is pretty important when considering all of these rankings. One huge aspect that greatly skews how we look at games, movies, music, and tons of other consumable content is that a standard is set and eventually the floodgates open with everybody and their Uncle Jimmy trying to replicate or jump on the bandwagon of that set experience. With this, we become much less tolerant of certain quirks in games, and the expectations rise. A game that would have been pretty damn cool could be considered not great because of the saturation. There's so many Souls-likes that exist that it's possible I also have rose-tinted glasses while looking back on some of the older titles on this list. If you guys want to see me check these games out again in 2024, let me know in the comments. If you also want to see more Souls-like videos on the channel, mention which ones are worthwhile to check out that I might have not played. Ironically, while writing this list, I actually ranked this game a little lower, then came back to only find out there were so many updates that changed the problems with it that it instantly got bumped up. You might be able to guess what it is, but I didn't think it was going to rank this high at all. It was really tough for me to recommend this on release because of the problems that needed to be sorted out with development. It's arguably the best looking game, regardless of style. At least in the context of this genre. It's arguably the most ambitious game in terms of the world and systems it incorporates. It is, in a way, a pioneer and trend starter of a new era of Souls-like games, and I don't think I have ever had a bigger love-hate relationship with the game in general. Lords of the Fallen, the new release, 2023 edition, is something I really wanted to be good. It was so good in certain ways and so bad in others that sadly the bad things outweighed the good, but because they were so easily changeable from my eyes, it actually frustrated me. I only saw pure potential every time I played it, and I almost beat the whole thing, then had to stop because of the major issue. Enemy density. This was on a scale of a game that was an MMO that's just pretending to be a Souls-like. It only would make sense to have designed Lords of the Fallen with that quantity of enemies if the game was meant to be played by 2 people or more at a time. Some people while live streaming the game did tell me that that's what they had in mind, but still, because you offered the option of playing solo, and most likely the large amount of the community probably will play solo, this was a big problem. I don't know of a single person that wasn't a little bothered by this, but thankfully, not only did they improve it, but they implemented around 30 individual changes over time that have the game in the best state it's been. Sure, you can say it's not perfect and there's still room for improvement, but now that my original issue isn't nearly as bad, I can safely say the qualities that I really love about the game shine, and it becomes fairly high ranking on this list. My favorite feature that sets Lords apart is the system of two simultaneous worlds, being the axial, or normal living world, and the umbral, or rather undead world. They're always coexisting wherever you are, and you step into either depending on being alive or having died. You can also use the lantern as an item to peer into the umbral world. The lantern as a tool extends into environmental manipulation, creating bridges, solving puzzles, and breaking objects in the environment to progress isn't a mind-blowing mechanic by itself, but I personally enjoy these types of systems in games when they aren't too obnoxious or necessary all the time. While I found there was a good balance with this, the only downside being the enemies that appear in Umbral World are adding to the already absurd density of the base enemies and overwhelming the player. Thankfully, again, this is better now. The ability to plant checkpoints in the ground with the seedling items is a cool extra now that they are unlimited with the newer update, and they also include a randomizer into the game without the need of adding external mods. This type of support is not common for Souls titles and usually achieved through the community. In a recent Lords of the Fallen discussion I had about the new updates since its release, I did mention how the future of Souls games in general is being able to modify the gameplay experience on the console platform, because PC players right now are mainly the only ones who get to enjoy them. Of course, you have Bloodborne, and you could do an enemy randomizer, 60 FPS, whatever you want, but good luck buying a jailbroken PS4 or jailbreaking your PS5. I secretly want to do that, that's why I'm just saying that. I'm a little jealous. Let me know if you want to see Bloodborne mods on the channel. Nonetheless, any developer that takes note of modifiers in the form of randomizers and other things, and also has a title with potential, is making a very smart move. The Kingpin, the all-time champion. The winner by quite a stretch is none other than Lies of P. This is most likely not a surprise, as I know so many of you enjoyed Lies of P. It truly is the future of Souls-like games that packages so many things into one, all while being tasteful. There's an abundance of things that you could design in a game that gives it some sort of cool factor, and some games overall are really cool, but that fades quite quickly. Lies of P is the game that will stand the test of time the most out of any title on this list, mark my words. It takes the story of Pinocchio, which is a classic, and twists it into some sort of world that really feels believable, and makes players like me actually care about what's going on. I by no means am a story player of games, I play games for gameplay, but this one really won me over with the story. I by no means require storyline or dialogue or anything. The characters don't even have to talk. I don't even care if the game actually has graphics that make sense. I just need gameplay that's good, predominantly. That's probably going to be the feature that stands out the most at the end of the day. It was definitely such a reward to get more into the storyline of Lies of P, and I found myself constantly taking my time, carefully considering what the NPCs were saying, and even rereading certain things over and over. I'm going to go out and say that the story is so good that it's probably one of the best 5 storylines in a game I've played in my life. If you want to see a video of me ranking the top 5 storylines of games that I like, or even Souls-like games, let me know in the comments below. Lies of P happened to be the first game I had played in a long time that actually occupied my mind throughout the day when I wasn't playing it. I can't remember the last time I had been thinking that much about how cool the world was, the feel of the gameplay, and the reward of progression. There's so many good things to say about it that it's hard for me to even pick out things I don't like at this point. The major features that shine are the grindstone tool that's always readily available with a variety of buffs that seriously make a difference. The immaculate parry system that is the most satisfying I've ever used, and I would even actually rank it against Sekiro and say that the parry system in Lies of P is better. Sure, it might have some less frames, but the accuracy of it tied into the whole package of still having RPG elements and the storyline, the atmosphere, unbelievable. Lies of P's implementation of the Bloodborne-style quick-step system while targeting enemies but regular roll when not targeting enemies has always been something I've enjoyed more than the classic roll system, such as the one in Dark Souls trilogy. The visuals of the game are not ultra-realistic, but have such a definitive style that there's really nothing I could find that broke the immersion in my first playthrough. One other thing that was really cool, but not even a big deal, was that I couldn't even break the game. There was no glitches or bugs that I could even find. And I'm sure other people probably had some, but just it was so polished and well put together that it seems like they actually considered quite a lot of problems that could go wrong and nipped them before they actually happened. The execution of this was so good that I swear it's almost like they wrote a book of the exact Lies of P story before and adapted it into a game. I think the people that made this deserve a medal, to be honest, and I'm super excited to see what they do next. Undeniably, Lies of P has the best gameplay out of anything on this list, regardless of all the story and all the gloating that I have about the features. The boss fights are memorable and unique. It has no excess clutter to remove, yet no detail spared for its vision. The fact Lies of P exists makes me so excited for the future, just because there's going to be extra competition out there, and it truly felt like Hidetaka Miyazaki, the creator of Dark Souls, actually oversaw this project and had direct involvement in it, even though he wasn't a part of it at all. With all that being said, thank you for watching the video, guys, and let me know what Souls-like titles that I should check out that weren't on this list. Also, which order would you rank the games if you've played some of them or all of them? Be sure to check out the other YouTube channels on the screen right here for music playthroughs and also long play unedited content. I wish you all a great day.